This is the Canterlot Police Department. We have the building surrounded. Don't try to move or you will be shot.
The sound of blaring, chattering, and helicopters were circling around the small riverside home as big ponies in armour began to crash their bodies against the door, though it was no use. The doors had been barricaded by old dusty cupboards and small dining tables. The pony inside the house sighed as she stared at a plank of wood on the floor that had been moved out of place as she packed her things into a small polka-dotted red bag.
That's the 6th time this year I've had to use this.
She pushed the plank out of the way before the sight of the stone corridor was below her. She sighed and jumped down, before quickly moving the plank back into place as a noise was heard, indicating it was closed properly. She began quickly running down the halls, the vision of the meadow in front of her. This was her escape route. She could hear the noises of the door being smashed to dust, and the police ponies knocking down everything in her house. She smiled.
They'll never find me down here.
Her secret had been discovered a few months prior to the current incident. While walking out of an alley, one of the local ponies, Daisy, had spotted her. Although she had been captured by the police, after her friends yelled at her, she made an escape route and helped the other prisoners escape as well. Some of them were more dangerous than her, which made the police department confused on which creature to lock up first. Luckily, she was not one of them, and led her life in the shadows for a few weeks without any pony knowing she was there. Although her memory was still foggy, she could remember what happened on the day she was discovered.
Police, somebody, anybody? The
No,
loud
Pinkie,
shouting
they
was
don't.
cut off by the blade of a knife.
The victim laid on the ground. Though they were not dead, the pony standing above the body gave a dependent look.
That one was too easy.
She sighed, smiling slightly as she watched the victim begin to slowly disappear from reality.
How come ponies in this town are so frail nowadays? And I thought past me was weak.
She licked some of the blood off of her coat before moving the body into a dumpster. The time was 1:42. If any pony was awake right now, they'd probably be a vampire bat. She laughed at the thought, remembering the time when she became one herself. It was a rather nice experience, although she didn't like to brag. Pinkie Pie was right on that day. Although Twilight and the others had tried to disapprove of her, she was telling the truth.
Do vampire ponies drink blood? No, Pinkie, they don't.
She could remember those lines like it was yesterday. While she was flying around the orchards that night, a strange but inviting smell had come from a nearby house in Ponyville. Using her newfound flying skills and agility, she quickly flew towards the town and hid herself behind a street lamp. Lying in the street was a young filly, crying and staring at the wound she had. She felt sad staring at this sight, although it was not the first time she had seen this. Most of the time she would give them a bandage and invite them over for snacks, but tonight something was different. Her bat senses had already taken nearly full control over her, thanks to her friends searching in the farm, and only the farm, ignoring the possibilities of her running off. They didn't have the only apples. She twitched and shook herself as she stared at the young pony, who was now calling for help. She watched as a more dark red liquid fell from her leg, preventing her from getting up. She kept staring. She couldn't help it, but her bat senses tingled within her.
You know what to do.
She had heard that voice before, but this time it was dark, menacing, as if it was commanding her to do something of unspeakable evil.
What do my friends think of me?
She whispered, knowing she would regret it later.
Your friends don't matter right now. You know what to do.
She continued to stare at the pony, but more dependent than sad. Her eyesight slowly trailed from the pony's face down to her leg. The blood was getting worse, and was beginning to cover the ground. The pony's eyes drooped down.
She's going to faint. Quickly.
The voice scowled again. Now she slowly moved down the pole like a lizard and stared at the pony, fangs bared.
Fluff?
Everything went red after that.
How could you do this?
She stared at the ground knowingly, although she was not upset.
I thought we were friends.
Her friends had found out about the alley murder from 2 nights ago. She thought their visit to her prison would be somewhat pleasant, hoping they would be different from the man-mares that had locked her up after the sighting.
To think of you killing another pony.
She watched, narrow eyes, as the orange pony leaned into the lavender one and began to slowly weep and cry. This was not something she did often.
The princess said she would have banished you, but since you're an element of harmony, you get to stay in prison.
The purple one said, trying to remain calm as her coat got covered in tears from both her and the pony near her back.
Hopefully you would have rethought your choices once you come back.
That one was too easy. Walked away. The pink pony, whose mane had deflated, was staring angrily at her, making several decapitation symbols with her hooves. This was, surprisingly, not the maddest she'd seen her. She sighed and sat back in her prison bed before falling asleep as the sounds of her prison mates rang in her ears. She could see it now. The meadow was only a few meters away now. Her heart had already skipped a few beats. As she quickly jumped out of the hole, she turned around, only to see Ponyville several miles away. The sirens and shouting continued. Before she could move any further to escape to another town, a loud slumping sound came to her ears. She quickly turned around, seeing her 5 friends as well as multiple police ponies staring at her.
Fluttershy?
The alicorn scowled as the police ponies moved closer, levitating weapons and handcuffs with their magic. Fluttershy groaned.
Damn it.